The dusty gloves. The attic reeked of naphthalene and bygone summers. Tiny particles pirouetted in the solitary sunbeam that knifed through a chink in the sealed window. Timmy choked, swiping the air before him. His mission: unearth the Christmas ornaments, a task Mom considered too taxing for Grandpa George. Yet the boxes brimming with festive trinkets remained elusive, barricaded behind a fortress of discarded relics. He stumbled over a bulky object, unleashing a miniature dust storm. "Whoops!" he mumbled, glancing down. It was a time-worn leather holdall, sequestered in the murkiest corner. Intrigued, Timmy wrestled it free. The hide was creased and rigid, the zipper seized. After a determined effort, it yielded with a rusty shriek. Within, nestled among brittle newspaper fragments and aged cotton batting, lay a pair of boxing gloves. They were battered, the leather scarred and stained by time, their laces tattered. They carried the faint aroma of perspiration, mingled with a sharper scent, perhaps embrocation? Timmy slid his small hands into the gloves. They were comically oversized, engulfing his fingers entirely. He awkwardly shadowboxed, imitating moves gleaned from television. He felt foolish, yet strangely invigorated. "Grandpa!" he called out, his voice reverberating through the spacious confines. "Check this out!" He descended the creaky steps, the gloves thumping against his shins. He discovered George where he always was, settled into his armchair before the television, the sound muted. The screen pulsed with the grainy visuals of an antique film. "Look!" Timmy announced, brandishing the gloves. George's gaze drifted from the screen to the gloves. A spark, surprise, recognition, illuminated his features. He extended a trembling hand and gingerly accepted a glove. He traced the worn leather, a subtle smile gracing his lips. "Where did you find these, Timmy?" he inquired, his voice gravelly. "Up in the attic. In an old bag." "Whose are they?" George fell silent, lost in reverie. "These were mine," he finally breathed, his voice a mere ghost. "A lifetime ago." Timmy's eyes widened in disbelief. "You were a boxer, Grandpa? Like Muhammad Ali?" George chuckled, a hollow, rasping sound. "Hardly like Ali. I was just an amateur. So long ago." "Did you win a lot?" Timmy pressed, eager to hear tales of his grandpa as a youthful, powerful pugilist. George shook his head. "A few. More defeats than victories, likely." He paused thoughtfully. "But I loved watching Ali. He was unique. More than just a fighter. He was the greatest," Timmy proclaimed, recalling fragments from televised biographies. "Float like a butterfly, sting like a bee." He threw another awkward punch, nearly toppling a floor lamp. George smiled anew, a genuine, heartening smile that crinkled the corners of his eyes. "He was quick," he observed. "Incredible agility. And he was brave. Truly brave. Not solely in the ring." "What do you mean?" Timmy queried, settling onto the floor alongside his grandfather's chair. George inhaled deeply. "He stood for what he believed in. Even when it was difficult. Even when the world was against him." He averted his gaze, focusing on some intangible point in the distance. "He refused induction. Stated he had no quarrel with the Viet Cong." Timmy knitted his brow. He lacked a grasp of politics or warfare. "But that was wrong, right? Not enlisting?" "Some felt that way. He forfeited his title, his license to box. He was condemned." George's tone held a newfound strength, resonant with quiet conviction. Yet he held firm to his principles. He refused to be coerced into actions against his conscience. He pointed a trembling finger toward the flickering television screen. "He also battled Parkinsons, you know. 4 decades. Even then, he persevered, striving to better the world." Timmy regarded the glove in George's grasp, then back at his grandfather's lined face. He discerned sadness there, yet coupled with something else, reverence. A profound respect for a man who had championed his ideals, irrespective of the sacrifice. "Tell me about his fights," Timmy urged, scooting closer. Tell me about the rumble in the jungle. George hesitated, then a grin spread across his visage. He commenced to recount stories of Ali's celebrated matches, his voice gaining resonance with each utterance. He detailed Ali's lightning jabs, his rope-a-dope strategy, his indomitable spirit. Timmy listened, captivated, his imagination summoning images of the charismatic fighter, gliding across the canvas, evading blows and landing decisive punches. He felt a link to his grandfather, a mutual comprehension of something significant, something beyond their immediate sphere. For the first time in weeks, George seemed genuinely present, his eyes gleaming with a vitality Timmy hadn't witnessed in ages. The dusty gloves, dormant in the attic for countless years, had somehow breathed new life into him. The shaking hands. The chipped mug clinked precariously against its saucer as Grandpa George strained to raise it. Spilled tea formed a dark bloom on the checkered cloth, a fragrant betrayal of the unsteady hand that held it. Timmy's tale of the creek's leviathan catfish withered on his tongue. He'd been bursting to share, his hands gesticulating wildly to illustrate the fish's impossible size, but his attention snagged on George's hands. They vibrated with a subtle tremor, a persistent shiver seemingly rooted in the deepest marrow. "Let me, Grandpa," Timmy offered, moving to intercept the mug. George recoiled, a spark of something akin to irritation flashing across his features before his expression settled back into its familiar, gentle lines. "I'm all right, Timmy. Just a touch off today." He finally coaxed the mug to his lips, but more of the amber liquid traced a path down his chin than reached its intended destination. He swiped at it with a calloused hand, leaving a mocha smear against the landscape of wrinkles. A cold dread settled in Timmy's stomach. It wasn't just today. He'd been a witness to it before: the faltering movements, the gradual slowing, the difficulty George sometimes experienced wrestling with buttons or keeping his fishing rod level. He had simply refused to acknowledge the change, to confront the nebulous fear it evoked. "Grandpa," Timmy began, his voice barely audible, "why are your hands doing that?" George exhaled, a weary sigh that seemed to carry the burden of years. He placed the mug back on the table, the muted thud echoing in the suddenly hushed kitchen. He met Timmy's gaze, his usually bright blue eyes clouded with an unfamiliar sorrow. "It's Parkinson's, Timmy," he confessed, his voice a low rasp. "The doctor told me some time ago. It complicates things." Parkinson's. The word rolled around in Timmy's head, foreign and ominous. It sounded like a villain conjured from the pages of his comics. But the raw vulnerability in his grandfather's eyes confirmed its stark reality. "What is it?" he pressed, his own voice acquiring a tremor. "It's an ailment," George explained slowly, carefully. "It interferes with the signals from my brain to my body. That's why the shaking, the sluggishness. It's likely to worsen over time." The scientific explanation swam around Timmy, but the gist landed squarely. This Parkinson's was stealing something essential from his grandpa, some vital part of him. Images flashed through his mind: fishing trips, meticulous model airplane construction, the rhythm of shared stories on the porch swing. Would Parkinson snatch those moments too? A painful knot constricted Timmy's throat. He fought the urge to wail, to rail against the injustice, to somehow rewind time. But he knew empty emotion was useless. He focused on his grandpa, his face a road map of worry and fatigue, and a powerful instinct bloomed within him. A fierce protectiveness, a staunch devotion. "What can I do to help?" Timmy asked, his voice finding strength. A wan smile touched George's lips. "Just being here, Timmy, is enough." "No, it isn't," Timmy insisted, surging forward. "I can help with the tea, with your shirt, with anything. I can be your assistant." George chuckled, a dry, quiet sound. "My assistant, eh?" He extended a trembling hand and laid it on Timmy's. "I suppose I could use a capable assistant." His grip, despite its fragility, possessed surprising strength, a reassuring anchor in the churning sea of the unknown. Timmy squeezed back, matching the pressure. He couldn't predict the future, couldn't fathom the full extent of this Parkinson's monster's reach. But one truth resonated clear and unwavering: He would defend his grandpa with every fiber of his being. He would be George Bellwether's champion, his guardian, his steadfast friend. He would be there, tremors and all. He would learn every way to offer support. He pictured Muhammad Ali, unyielding, facing every challenge. Grandpa George had always respected Ali's indomitable spirit. Timmy would find that same courage within himself. An event for a hero. The radio crackled with static, then a clear, excited voice cut through. And this Saturday, the legendary Muhammad Ali will be speaking at the Regency Hotel, benefiting the National Neurological Research Foundation. Tickets are still available. Timmy, sprawled on the floor, momentarily forgot about his half-finished Lego castle. His head shot up. Grandpa! Did you hear that? Muhammad Ali's coming! George Bellwether, hunched in his armchair, barely reacted. He was staring out the window, his face a landscape of deep lines and weary resignation. The afternoon light caught the tremor in his hand as he reached for his tea. So I heard, he mumbled, his voice raspy. Timmy scrambled to his feet, his energy buzzing. We have to go, Grandpa! We just have to! It's Muhammad Ali! He knew his grandfather had always admired the boxer, had told him stories of his fights, his wit, his unwavering principles. George sighed, a puff of air that seemed to carry all the weight of his illness. Timmy, you know I don't get out much anymore. His gaze drifted back to the window, to the swaying branches of the old oak tree in the yard. Timmy, though young, sensed the resistance. He knew his grandpa wasn't the man he used to be. The Parkinsons had stolen pieces of him, leaving behind a quieter, more fragile version. But Timmy also knew the fire that still flickered within. But Grandpa, he pleaded, kneeling beside the armchair. It's for a good cause. And it's Ali. You always said he was the greatest. Remember that time you showed me the old newspaper clippings? The ones about the rumble in the jungle? He rummaged through his memory, trying to find the right argument. And you said he was brave, not just in the ring, but everywhere. You said he stood up for what he believed in, even when it was hard. George's gaze softened a fraction. He looked down at Timmy, his eyes clouded with a mixture of affection and something else, a deep, almost painful longing. That was a long time ago, Timmy. A different life. Timmy refused to be deterred. He grabbed his grandpa's hand, his small fingers wrapping around the larger, trembling ones. Please, Grandpa? For me? And for you. You need to see him. It'll be an event for a hero. He squeezed gently, hoping his earnestness would break through. He didn't quite understand what his grandfather was going through, not really, but he knew that lately, George seemed to be fading, retreating further into himself. Maybe Ali, could pull him back. Silence stretched between them, punctuated only by the tick-tock of the grandfather clock in the hall. Timmy held his breath, watching George's face, searching for any sign of capitulation. Finally George spoke, his voice barely a whisper. I don't know, Timmy. It's a lot of trouble. He gestured vaguely towards his legs, his hands. I'll help you, Grandpa. I'll do everything. I'll push your chair, I'll get you water, I'll even be quiet the whole time if you want. Timmy offered, a sacrifice of epic proportions for a boy who rarely stopped talking. A faint smile touched George's lips. Quiet, huh? That'll be a first. He looked out the window again, his gaze lingering on the oak tree, its branches now swaying in a slightly stronger breeze. All right, Timmy, he said, his voice a little stronger now. All right. Let's go see Ali. One last time. Timmy whooped with joy, throwing his arms around his grandfather. Yes. Yes. This is going to be amazing, Grandpa. The greatest. George chuckled softly, a sound that Timmy hadn't heard in a while. As Timmy hugged him tighter, George closed his eyes, a strange mix of anticipation and trepidation swirling within him. Seeing Ali, it was a connection to a past he cherished, a past that was slipping further and further away. He only hoped he was strong enough to face it. Preparing for the big day. The closet whispered of bygone days, mothballs mingling with the lingering ghost of George's signature Old Spice. Timmy, perched on tiptoes, scanned the crowded rods. Operation Meet the Champ in style is a go, Grandpa. Which shirt's the contender? That cerulean number? Really makes your eyes pop. George, perched on the bedside, moved with the measured pace of age. Honestly, Timmy, it hardly matters. I doubt Ollie's concerned with my fashion choices. A subtle tremor vibrated through his hand as he reached for his walking stick. Poppycock. It's first impressions, even for legends meeting legends. Besides, Timmy brandished a pristine, white button-down. This one's practically untouched. Carol's Christmas offering, guaranteed to make you dapper, according to her. A dry chuckle escaped George, a sound like rustling leaves. Carol always did possess a certain flair. Fine, the white it is. But you're on button duty. These old fingers aren't cooperating today. As Timmy meticulously worked each button, his small face etched with concentration, George's thoughts drifted back through the years. You know, when I was barely a man, a year or two older than you, I witnessed Ollie take on Liston. A spectacle, pure and simple. The world held its breath. And Ollie, so audacious, so brimming with self-assurance, crowned himself the greatest before he truly earned the title. But he proved it, Timmy, beyond any shadow of a doubt. Timmy's hand paused mid-button. Grandpa, you recount that fight a lot. Do I? George's gaze seemed to recede inward, lost to the past. Well, it resonated deeply. It transcended mere sport. It was about the courage to stand firm in your convictions, even when the chorus of dissent is deafening. Ollie epitomized that. He risked all for his principles. That was genuine bravery. Timmy finished the last button, smoothing the fabric. There you go. Looking sharp. Now the tie. He rummaged through a drawer, emerging with a silk tie emblazoned with miniature boxing gloves. This one's a knockout. George's expression soured slightly. Timmy, that tie is exuberant. Precisely. It screams devoted fan. Here, let me. Timmy stood before George, looping the tie around his neck. His small hands grappled with the knot, persistence battling clumsiness. Almost there. Got it. Not too shabby, if I say so myself. He took a step back, assessing his handiwork. A tad askew, perhaps, but hey, even Ollie absorbed a few blows. George regarded his reflection, a faded echo of the robust man he once embodied. A shadow of uncertainty flickered in his eyes. I don't know, Timmy. I feel frail. What if the words simply won't come? What if I make a fool of myself? Timmy closed the distance between them, his eyes radiating unwavering belief. He gave George's shoulder a gentle squeeze. Grandpa, you're the strongest person I know. You battle every day, even when it's grueling. Remember your mantra? Never yield, never surrender. That's Ollie's creed. That's your creed. Besides, he added with a playful smirk, I'll be right there. I'll have your back. And who knows, maybe Ollie will even autograph my baseball. George met Timmy's gaze, the unwavering faith in those young eyes a spark to his own fading embers. He straightened, adjusted the tie, and offered a tentative smile. All right, Timmy. Let's go meet the champ. A room full of hope. The car coughed its last breath in a space 2 blocks from the community center. George leaned heavily on Timmy, each step a monumental effort. The late afternoon air, thick with the scent of exhaust and anticipation, hung heavy in their lungs. George wheezed. Sure packed this place in, didn't they? Timmy, ever the optimist, grinned. Means a lot of people care, Grandpa. Just think, maybe one of them has the answer we're looking for. He squeezed George's arm, a silent promise of support. The community center buzzed with an energy that vibrated right through George's worn leather shoes. Laughter, snippets of conversations, and the clatter of folding chairs being arranged created a chaotic symphony. A banner proclaiming, "Hope blooms here," stretched across the entrance, its bright colors a stark contrast to the muted tones George usually gravitated towards. Inside, the crowd was a kaleidoscope of humanity. Elderly couples holding hands, young families with restless children, and individuals with varying degrees of visible struggle filled the room. George felt a pang of something he hadn't felt in a long time: belonging. They were all here for the same reason, united by a shared burden and a fragile thread of hope. A woman in a bright blue scrubs uniform detached herself from a group near the registration table. Her dark hair was pulled back in a neat ponytail, and a warm smile radiated from her face. "You must be Mr. Bellwether and Timmy. I'm Maria Rodriguez. So glad you could make it." Maria's hand felt strong and reassuring as she gently guided George toward a quieter corner of the room. "Let me get you settled. Is there anything I can do to make you more comfortable, Mr. Bellwether? A glass of water, perhaps?" George shook his head, his gaze sweeping over the room. "Just watching. Seeing everyone." Timmy, ever curious, peppered Maria with questions. "Is Mr. Ollie here yet? Is he really as strong as they say? Do you think he knows a lot about Parkinson's?" Maria chuckled, her eyes crinkling at the corners. "He's backstage, resting up before his speech. And yes, Timmy, he's a very strong man, in many ways. He understands more than you might think. He's been dealing with this for a while now." She lowered her voice slightly, a hint of sadness in her tone. "He's an inspiration to all of us." She produced 2 programs from a stack on a nearby table. "Here you go. It has the schedule of events, and some information about the research being funded. Don't hesitate to ask if you need anything at all." As Maria moved off to assist another attendee, George settled into a chair near the back, Timmy perched on the edge of the seat beside him. The air crackled with anticipation. A young woman with a tremor in her hand practiced writing her name repeatedly on a notepad. A man in a wheelchair, his face etched with determination, shared a joke with his companion. A room full of people, each with their own story, their own struggles, their own sliver of hope. George watched, his heart a knot of conflicting emotions. Fear, resignation, and a flicker of something akin to optimism warred within him. Maybe, just maybe, this wasn't a fool's errand. Maybe, surrounded by this sea of faces, he could find the courage he so desperately needed. He glanced at Timmy, his grandson's eyes wide with excitement, and a wave of protectiveness washed over him. He owed it to Timmy, if nothing else, to keep fighting. The fight wasn't over yet. The champ speaks. "Grandpa, please?" "Just try," Timmy urged, his voice thick with concern. Kneeling beside George's armchair, his young face mirrored unwavering resolve. "Mr. Ollie's here. Remember how much you wanted this." George's eyes remained shut, a more violent tremor now seizing his hands. "Timmy, I'm just weary. What purpose would it serve? He wouldn't even recognize me." "That's not true," Timmy countered, clasping George's frail hand. "He remembers everyone. Maria says he's incredibly inspiring." "Please, Grandpa?" From across the room, Maria, a community center volunteer, offered a tender smile, then extended a hand to Timmy. "Let's just see if we can make him comfortable, Timmy." "No pressure, George." With Timmy supporting him on one side and Maria on the other, they gently coaxed George upright. Each movement was a slow, deliberate conquest over his relentless malady. They advanced with painstaking care toward the auditorium. Inside, a packed house buzzed with anticipatory murmurs. An electric excitement filled the air. As they found seats near the rear, a hush descended upon the throng. A spotlight pierced the dimness, focusing on the stage as a figure emerged. The applause erupted, a thunderous ovation that momentarily drowned George's exhaustion. It was him. Muhammad Ali. Though his face bore the marks of time and his movements were measured, the spark in his eyes still blazed. He approached the microphone, his presence commanding despite the evident toll of Parkinson's. He raised a trembling hand, and the cacophony gradually subsided. "Friends," he began, his voice raspy yet resonant, "it's a blessing to be here. To be anywhere you grasp? Every day is a precious gift." He spoke of his boxing days, not with vainglorious boasting, but with introspective humility. He shared tales of punishing workouts, formidable adversaries, and hard-fought triumphs. He confessed the fear that plagued him before each bout, the gnawing doubt that challenged his spirit. "People witness the champion," he declared, his voice gaining momentum. "They see the glory. They remain blind to the struggle. They don't see the moments you crave surrender, when you believe you've reached your limit. But that's when you must summon inner reserves. That's when you have to discover that last ember of courage, that final spark of fight." He paused, his gaze sweeping over the audience. "And it's not just in the ring. Life delivers blows, too. Life knocks you flat. It attempts to keep you there. But you must rise again. You must persevere." Then, he addressed Parkinson's directly. He described its challenges, its limitations. But he also illuminated the lessons it had imparted. "This affliction," he stated, his tone softening, "has tempered me. It has sharpened my appreciation for the simple joys. It has illuminated the true priorities of existence." He locked eyes with the crowd, his gaze radiating profound empathy. "It's about serving others. It's about leaving a positive mark. It's about extending kindness, offering compassion, being present for those in need." He continued for another half hour, weaving anecdotes, offering words of solace, and emanating an aura of unwavering optimism. He underscored the significance of resilience, of refusing to yield, of unearthing strength amidst adversity. As he brought his speech to a close, the audience erupted in another resounding standing ovation. Tears flowed freely, tracing paths down faces, including George's. Timmy squeezed his grandfather's hand, his eyes gleaming with pride. George felt a wave of warmth suffuse him, dispelling the icy grip of despair. Weariness persisted, the tremors still racked his frame, yet something fundamental had shifted within him. A spark had been resurrected, a glimmer of hope kindled. Perhaps, just perhaps, he could summon the fortitude to persevere, to embrace life, to continue aiding others. He gazed at Timmy, at Maria, at the faces surrounding him, all profoundly touched by Ali's message. He comprehended he was not solitary in his struggle. And that revelation, he understood, changed everything. A moment of doubt. The throng pressed closer, a sea of faces hungry for a brush with greatness. Anchored precariously at the periphery by Timmy's tenacious grip, George was suddenly struck by a wave of giddiness, a queasy lurch that had nothing to do with his Parkinson's. This was something else, a volatile cocktail of yearning and trepidation. Ali, still possessing that inimitable aura despite the toll exacted by time and illness, greeted each admirer with genuine grace. He signed autographs, each stroke a little slower now, but his gaze held an unwavering intensity, locking onto each person. The queue shuffled ahead, a sluggish procession toward a juncture George now questioned. A tremor coursed through his fingers. He jammed his hands into his pockets, finding scant comfort in the thin material. What if the words caught in his throat? What if his voice, already fragile from the disease, deserted him entirely? The specter of himself, a palsied, stammering old man, imposing on Ali's precious time, ignited a fierce wave of self-reproach. He risked a glance at Timmy, neck craned high, eyes alight with fervent anticipation. "Grandpa, he's right there!" Timmy chirped, oblivious to the turmoil raging within George. "He looks even bigger than on TV." George forced a wan smile. "Always a sizable fella," he rasped, his voice swallowed by the murmuring crowd. But the words felt like cinders in his mouth. It wasn't Ali's physical form that preoccupied him. No, it was the sheer audacity of his quest, to seek counsel from a titan who had conquered so many adversaries, both real and imagined. Who was he, George Bellwether, to burden this man with his own insignificant anxieties? The line ebbed forward again. They were near enough now for George to discern the subtle musk of cologne clinging to Ali, a surprisingly refined scent at odds with his legendary power. He registered the weariness etched into Ali's features, the almost imperceptible shake in his hand as he scrawled another signature. A surge of protectiveness welled up within George, a completely unexpected emotion. He suddenly yearned to shelter Ali from the relentless crush of devotion, to gift him a moment's respite. An urge to retreat consumed him, to vanish back into the anonymity of the gathering. "Grandpa, you okay?" Timmy asked, concern coloring his voice. He'd sensed George's faltering, the hunted look flitting across his face. "You look a little green." George manufactured another smile. "Just a touch tired, Timmy. That's all." But Timmy wasn't fooled. He knew his grandpa too well. He recognized the fear lurking deep within his eyes, the uncertainty that had become a permanent fixture. He tightened his grip on George's hand. "You gotta do it, Grandpa," he insisted, his voice resolute. "We came all this way. You gotta talk to him." George gazed down at Timmy's earnest face, his unwavering faith a sharp contrast to his own wavering resolve. He saw the reflection of his own aspirations mirrored in Timmy's gaze, that fierce determination to seize every opportunity. And in that instant, he knew he couldn't fail Timmy. He couldn't fail himself. He drew in a deep breath, striving to calm his quaking limbs. "You're right, Timmy," he replied, a note of conviction creeping into his voice. "You're absolutely right." The line lurched forward. Their turn was imminent. Meeting a hero. The banquet hall exhaled its final guests, the tinkle of crystal and silver dwindling as the crowd dispersed. George Bellwether, anchored to the spot by a potted palm, clung to its cool, curved base. The question, though rehearsed countless times, remained a stubborn knot in his throat, mirroring the nervous flutter in his fingers. The evening had been a whirlwind of forced pleasantries and droning speeches. He'd been too intimidated to approach the champ during the reception. Ollie seemed encased in an invisible shield of admirers and handlers. Now, with the room thinning, a fragile ember of optimism flickered against the ever-present shadow of his own self-doubt. He watched Ollie across the room, the icon perhaps a bit bowed, a touch slower, yet still imbued with that undeniable charisma. Ollie was bidding farewell to a small gathering, his voice a low rumble, his hands moving with the same fluid grace George recalled from the ring. Then Ollie pivoted, his gaze sweeping over the space, and for a fleeting, charged instant, their eyes locked. George's pulse hammered in his ears. He averted his gaze, suddenly acutely aware of his unassuming attire, his aged tweed jacket feeling suddenly ill-fitting and unremarkable. He was just another face, a cipher. But then, a presence loomed beside him. He looked up. Muhammad Ali. Just inches away. A wave of surprise, a hushed expectancy, rippled through the remaining few. Yet Ali seemed oblivious, his attention solely fixed on George. He offered a smile, a warm, genuine expression that etched lines around his eyes. And then, to George's utter disbelief, Ali lowered himself. The man, the legend, kneeling on the plush carpet, meeting George at eye level. "Hello there," Ali greeted, his voice surprisingly gentle, a hint of rasp to it. "You all right?" George swallowed, the carefully constructed question disintegrating into fragments. I am Mr. Ali." "Thank you." Ali's eyes, still gleaming with intelligence, held his. "You seem preoccupied. Something weighing on you?" George hesitated. This wasn't part of the script. He hadn't anticipated such kindness. "Well," he started, his voice catching slightly. I wanted to ask you something." Ali simply nodded, urging him on. "Go ahead. Ask me anything." George inhaled deeply, fighting the trembling in his limbs. He had to voice it. This was his moment. "Mr. Ali," he began, his voice gaining strength, "I admire you. More profoundly than words can express. For all you've accomplished, all you've championed. But how? How do you summon the resilience? When the world feels relentless?" He gestured vaguely with a shaky hand. "When the battle never ceases?" Silence hung heavy, punctuated only by the drone of the ventilation. Ali didn't immediately respond. He simply studied George, his gaze filled with deep empathy. Then he reached out, his own hand exhibiting a slight tremor, and gently covered George's. "Courage," he murmured, his voice barely audible, "isn't about the absence of fear, my friend. It's about acknowledging the fear, and pressing forward regardless. It's about rising each time you're knocked down. He paused, his grip firming slightly. And sometimes, he continued, courage manifests as simply asking for support. As allowing another to share the load. As recognizing you're not facing it alone. He squeezed George's hand reassuringly. You're not alone, my friend. George felt another lump rising in his throat, but this time, it wasn't born of fear. It was hope. A fragile, nascent hope, but hope nonetheless. He met Ali's gaze and saw not the icon, not the victor, but a fellow sojourner, someone familiar with the exhaustion, the fight. Thank you, George managed, his voice thick with emotion. Thank you, Mr. Ali. Ali smiled once more, that same genuine, heartening smile. Call me Muhammad, he offered. Then, carefully, deliberately, he pushed himself to his feet, his hand lingering on George's for a heartbeat longer. Take care now, George. Keep striving. As Ali turned to depart, George stood there, his hand still tingling from Ali's touch. The resignation hadn't entirely dissipated, but something had fundamentally shifted within him. A small seed of bravery, planted by a legend, had begun to take root. He knew the battle wasn't concluded. Perhaps it never would be. But now, he knew he wasn't in it by himself. The strength to help others. The tremor in Ali's hand seemed to mirror the one in George's own. But Ali's eyes, they held a strength George couldn't comprehend. It's not about me anymore. Ali had rasped, his voice a ghost of its former thunder. The fighting, that was then. Now it's about helping others. That's where the strength comes from. Helping those who need it. Takes the focus off yourself, see? The simplicity of it stung George. He'd been so consumed by his own shrinking world, his own failing body, that he'd forgotten the vast world outside, teeming with needs. He'd become a prisoner of his own discomfort. Back home, the silence of the house amplified his unease. Timmy was at school, and the echoing quiet usually soothed him. Today, it felt like an accusation. He wandered into the kitchen, aimlessly opening and closing cupboards. Grandpa? Timmy's voice startled him. He hadn't heard the boy come in. You okay? You look funny. George forced a smile. Just thinking, Timmy. Thinking about things I could be doing. Timmy, ever the eager helper, perked up. Like what? I can help. I'm really good at dusting. And I can reach the high shelves now. George chuckled, a genuine sound that surprised even him. Well, I was thinking something bigger. Something to help other people. Timmy's face lit up. Like a superhero? Well, not exactly, George said. More like a helper hero. He thought about Ali's words, turning them over in his mind like smooth stones. It wasn't a cure, he knew that. But maybe it was a purpose. The next morning, George found himself standing outside the Helping Hands Community Center, a soup kitchen and resource center he'd driven past 100 times without truly seeing. The scent of simmering vegetables wafted through the open door, a comforting aroma that tugged him inside. A woman with kind eyes and a name tag that read, Maria, greeted him. Welcome to Helping Hands. Are you here for a meal or? Neither exactly. George stammered, suddenly feeling awkward. I'd like to volunteer. Maria's smile widened. That's wonderful. We can always use an extra pair of hands. Are you comfortable working in the kitchen? George hesitated. His tremor made simple tasks a challenge. I might be better at something else. Perhaps sorting donations? Maria nodded understandingly. Absolutely. We have a back room overflowing with clothes and canned goods. Come on, let me show you. The back room was indeed overflowing. Boxes stacked high, clothing spilling out of bags, a jumble of labels and sizes. George felt a surge of panic, quickly suppressed. He focused on one box at a time, carefully sorting cans of soup, beans, and vegetables. The repetitive motion was almost meditative, a welcome distraction from the anxieties that usually plagued him. Hours passed. His back ached, his hands throbbed, but he persevered. He found a rhythm, a sense of accomplishment in the small act of bringing order to the chaos. At one point, Maria brought him a cup of tea and a small plate of cookies. "You're doing a great job, George," she said, her voice warm. "We really appreciate your help." Her words were a balm to his weary soul. He realized that he wasn't just sorting cans, he was contributing, making a difference, however small. As he walked home that evening, the familiar aches and pains seemed less oppressive. The tremor in his hand still persisted, but it no longer felt like a symbol of his weakness. It was a reminder of his struggle, but also of his resilience. He saw Timmy playing in the front yard, kicking a soccer ball against the garage door. The boy grinned when he saw George. "Grandpa! Guess what? I scored 10 goals!" George ruffled Timmy's hair, feeling a surge of affection. "That's fantastic, Timmy! You're a natural. What did you do today, Grandpa?" Timmy asked, his eyes full of curiosity. George smiled. "I helped some people, Timmy. I helped them get the things they need." Timmy's face lit up. "Like a superhero." George laughed. "Maybe a little bit like a superhero. But mostly, just like someone who cares." As they walked into the house together, hand in hand, George knew that Ollie was right. The strength to face his own challenges wasn't something he could find within himself. It was something he could build, brick, by helping others. The fight wasn't over, it had simply changed.